Alright, I am back with another Destiny 2 video. I didn't know if we were going to get another big Wednesday blog today like we have the past few weeks because we just had a giant Strand blog specifically yesterday after the trailer, but there is just a mountain of information that Bungie wants to dole out, and this is another pretty sizable update, maybe not the longest out of all of them, but there is a good amount to go through here. I have already read this. I am not going to read it word for word, but I will go through the highlights and kind of talk about what that means and what my initial thoughts are based on what we're seeing here. This is about abilities, like if, are we too OP now? Are they nerfing a million things? Like, not really. I don't think this is like anything all that terrible, and then they do talk about a lot of stuff that they're adding. So this feels like this is probably going to be okay, and this is not some like crazy huge player power nerf from what I can tell. They start with talking about abilities and how they're trying to get back to where the 30th anniversary ability uptime meta was. The main thing they're doing now is rescaling the efficacy of discipline strength and the class ability stats on grenade melee and class ability regen. Pretty much tier 10 is going down to tier 8, so you will be able to spam less things. However, they talk about how because the way the mod system is changing and how you're going to be able to probably put more mods into your builds than ever before, there are just a million different ways that you can reduce these cooldowns outside of their just like stacking discipline or whatever, because so many of these existing mods aren't going away. And between all these, and between, things like Demolitionist or Wellspring, when Wellspring's actually working, what's the other one? Pugilist, like, there are, and then different aspects and fragments that also reduce cooldowns or give you energy back, plus the new elemental wells system they're doing, which it's not elemental wells anymore, but it's essentially the same thing, and that will give you ability energy back as well. Like, to me, I think this was the amount of ways we have to get ability energy back is the main kind of power gain thing in at least PvE. I think the regen rates are different when we're talking about PvP, because you're not just like, killing 5 enemies every 5 seconds, unless you're a super pro person. But so this seems to me, even though they don't really talk about, PvE being split from PvP here, this feels like this is something that's going to hit PvP more, while PvE will still have just a bazillion different options to reduce your cooldowns and keep your uptime up. I am not seeing anything like a Heart of Inmost Light nerf, which is a big ability spam Titan exotic. So sorry, Salt. They do also say that they think they went a little far on the dodge nerfs. I think some of these were just implemented, so they're knocking these back down to what they were before. But it's because this new stat scaling exists, so it might still feel a little longer than it was previously. But again, you can get class abilities and stuff back in other ways than just high mobility. And something like Gambler's Dodge, which automatically reloads your melee, it's, we have these loops that kind of get you your class ability back really quickly. So this is good. I'm glad they're reverting this, but it maybe is not a super buff because of the new stat scaling. They also go on to talk about roaming supers and how they know that some roaming supers are underpowered compared to others, and maybe they went a little far. They talk about how they haven't really come up with a full solution for kind of the roaming super power disparity right now, but for starters, they're going to make them make more orbs, and then single target supers they will make less orbs, but this will not apply to Well of Radiance, Word of Dawn, and Shadow Shot. So none of the kind of support ones. They are changing the 3 supers in the longest cooldown tier. These have always felt pretty bad since they made this change. Again, this is a PvP-focused change and why they made it in the first place, but good luck trying to use these in PvE half the time. So Hammer of Soul, Daybreak, and Spectral Blades are getting more than a minute knockdown of their base cooldown, so that's good. They are making some changes to specific subclasses. Ward of Dawn is getting its health reduced. This is mostly for PvP. The idea here is that people were spamming this too much and there's just barely any counterplay. They are making all weapons do 1.5 times damage to ward, as opposed to energy weapons doing 2.5 and kinetic doing 1. So there's more options to take it on, and it doesn't require you speccing into your energy slots. Armor of Light is getting PvP nerfs on maxed health, and then you will get PvE damage resistance from that, taken from the Void Overshield, and it doesn't negate precision damage. All right, so they also think Thundercrash is too annoying in PvP, so they are nerfing it everywhere. I think this is okay. I believe this is just for PvP. It says unchanged versus PvE targets. I think maybe it's just for this one, but I can't be sure. Max flight time is down from 5 to 4.5 seconds. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you just like drop out of this in midair, it's pretty annoying. Size of damaging volume around the player will inflate by 20%. Push it forward in front of the player to make flyby disintegrations more intentional. Descent now begins earlier in flight. Reduce landing detonation size versus players. So I'm not sure if all of this is unchanged versus PvE targets or just detonation size, but some amount of nerf there, not to damage. So your single target damage on Thundercrash against bosses is not changed. And then they're just increasing Fist of Havoc damage in PvE by 20%. I feel like that's already been increased a couple of times in PvE, but good luck running that as your main super in PvE on Arc Titan. Even with this, I don't know. I can't imagine that's going to do much. Okay. Arc Spark of Resistance Fragment is a little too easy in PvE and Crucible. So I think this is what gives you damage resistance when there's enemies around, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so it's increasing it. You need 2 enemies, or you need 3 enemies around, up from 2. And then once you're no longer surrounded, it will drop away after 2 seconds instead of 4 seconds. And then Daybreak, moving to Solar Warlock, they think they under-buffed that, nerfed it a little too much, whatever. They are decreasing the sword swinging to 6.5% per swing as opposed to 10%. And they're increasing its PvE damage by 25%. Curious if you put Dawn Course on, you could do some like halfway decent damage with Daybreak. So this one is, I don't know. I'm gonna look into that and see if that's actually gonna be worth it. Phoenix Dive, the pace cooldown was always absurd, 82 seconds. That's down to 55. If you have Heat Rises, the restoration triples. When Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive's cooldown is significantly reduced, allowing for rapid reactivations. That's during your super. And then also its max damage is up from 80 to 220, so almost triple there. This may be the biggest news in the entire thing. No more physics collision deaths. Physics collision damage will no longer be lethal to Guardians. And then later on, they will be nerfing fall damage as well, so it will never kill you. I assume that part is Strand focused because people are going to miss their grapples and fall and kill themselves a lot and be annoying. But the idea here is this should no longer mean you just die by like tripping over a random rock. This should prevent you from dying from like Cabal shields just bashing you into things. It's probably the most common one I see. And then one of the primary reasons I bet they're doing this is so there's no more sword griefing, so you can't just sword your teammates into walls to kill them anymore. Of course, you can still sword them off the edges of things, but not just like slamming them into walls. So that's a big change. One of the bigger ones listed here. And then we finally get some new stuff. So some of these have to do with the new little element things that they're integrating into some of the subclasses that don't have them. I don't know if this is all the details of them. They don't talk about the one with Arc, but Fire or Solar and Void go into this a little bit more. So here's a new Arc one, where critically wounded, taking damage to nearby enemies emits a burst of damaging Arc energy that jolts targets. I believe, wasn't there one that did this before, except I don't think it was Jolt. I think it was just Arc damage. So maybe they're just making that with 3.0. Spark of Haste, you have greatly increased resilience, recovery, and mobility while sprinting. That one seems good. I think that one seems like that could be very good if like suddenly your recuv is through the roof, like anytime you start sprinting. That seems, and then you're taking less damage. And then mobility increasing when you're sprinting. Mobility does not increase your sprint speed, and we have nothing in this entire thing or the last Buildcraft one that talks about mobility changing in any meaningful way. But, you know, that's still pretty good. And this is arc, so you're sprinting all the time because of being overloaded or whatever it's called. All right, solar. So now we're talking about fire sprites. These are the elemental well replacements, and they only grant grenade energy on pickup. So unlike solar wells, they are not granting. It was like your lowest. Was it random? Was your lowest uncharged ability? I don't know. But so you're only getting grenade energy, and then Void says it's doing class ability energy. So it's pretty significant. I assume Arc will be melee then. So my guess is Solar is more valuable because people usually want to spam grenades as much as possible. Mercy, when you revive an ally, you and them gain restoration, and picking Fire Sprite also grants restoration. So that's an additional effect that Fire Sprites would give is restoration. And we know how good restoration is, so this is essentially healing wells except better because restoration is better than healing wells. Solar Grenade Final Blows Cure You. Is Cure just the pure heal? Is that what Cure is? I don't remember. There's so many words now. Ember of Tempering creates a Fire Sprite on solar weapon kills when active in addition to its original effects. I don't know what the original ones were, but on any solar weapon kill, that's what it sounds like. The way elemental generation currently works is like every couple of kills it would create one, but I don't know. I assume there's some sort of ramp up time, and not every single kill you make with a solar weapon will create a Fire Sprite, but we'll see. And then this is one that gives you Fire Sprites on solar super defeats. Yeah, I mean, that seems a lot less valuable. Ember of Searing now creates Fire Sprite when defeating Scorch targets. Obviously, if you're running a solar build, you may indeed be running something like Incandescent that scorches things, and of course many abilities scorch things, so lots of ways to generate those. Don't know what any penalties are with these. They're not talking about those, so there might be like minus recovery or whatever. Void, so we have Void Breaches, same thing, but for class ability energy. I guess that makes sense because with Void, you are spamming Titan Barricades for Overshield, you're spamming Rift for Void Buddy, and then Hunter, you're spamming Dodge always with Hunter, but especially here for Invisibility. Alright, so finishers create a burst of void damage that makes enemies volatile, and then defeating volatile targets creates a Void Breach. So if you combine that with volatile rounds, just at baseline, defeating volatile targets creates a Void Breach. That seems, like, without more details, like, this is Fire Sprite on just solar weapon kills, this is volatile void kills, so that seems harder to trigger, but we don't know the full details of this, and what penalties you might suffer. Defeating a target while your shields are depleted gives you a temporary overshield. That seems good, especially with recent overshield buffs, and obviously when your shield is broken, that is when you would need a void overshield the most. Echo of Domineering creates a Void Breach when defeating suppressed targets. There's not that many suppression effects, although we have heard that there is going to be a new Void perk that does something. I think they described it as being somewhat similar to Incandescent or Jolt. I don't know if it's literally volatile rounds. I don't think it is, but it's something, so maybe it's suppression. I don't know. Echo of Harvest, defeating weakened targets, same thing. A little bit hard to weaken targets with. There's not that much stuff to weaken them. The thing that I immediately think of is Hunter Smoke, but and then this is granting Devour and picking up a Void Breach in addition to its original effects. I don't remember that. Was that an Orb of Power? Was this the one where Orb of Power also gives you Devour? So now you can get Devour on Orbs or Void Breaches. So that seems like it's going to make it pretty easy to get Devour on all classes, even more so than before, if that's true. And that is the end. So that is a good amount of stuff. Really, really curious to see all of the new aspects and fragments. I'm a little curious about stasis in the midst of all this because they just sent out those surveys and like nobody is using stasis practically, and we're not seeing any new additions here. Stasis has more aspects, but they have not added more fragments. They already have the little shards that give melee energy, so maybe I was wrong, maybe Arc are not getting that, but it is sort of weird here that Arc is not getting something listed here. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that and why these two have something and this doesn't, but I guess we'll find out. Maybe they're just not finalized yet and they didn't want to share them. But anyway, that's a lot of interesting info. I think all of this sounds fine, especially a nerf to architects who can resist that. So, anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.